Good afternoon and welcome to the SILA Foundation's July webinar, where licensing risk still hides in P&C and how to reduce it. My name is Julie Mendel and I'm the Education Trustee for the SILA Foundation. Before I introduce today's speaker, I have just a few housekeeping items for everyone. Our webinar today is about an hour in length. It's being recorded. Within the next week, you'll receive a link to the recording and a post-webinar survey that we would really appreciate you completing. You will also get a link to today's presentation slides. Please mute your microphones and turn off your videos so the focus stays on our speaker. We ask that you put any questions you may have in the chat box. We will be monitoring and posing those questions to the speaker on your behalf, and we're going to answer as many of them as we can in the time that we have available. Just a little bit about today's presentation. Licensing risk in P&C organizations rarely stems from misconduct. More often, it originates from operational gaps, fragmented ownership, and process drift as teams grow. This webinar will highlight where that risk still hides, including license gaps, appointment timing breakdowns, continuing education deficiencies, and incomplete audit documentation. The session will cover evolving regulatory expectations and provide practical strategies to strengthen oversight. You're going to gain actionable approaches to improving your monitoring, accountability, and audit readiness to reduce risk and support a stronger compliance posture. Today's presenter is Tabitha Richardson. She is the Director of Product Management and Development at WebCE, where she leads the Financial Services Division and oversees continuing education and compliance programs across insurance, securities, financial designations, and exam prep. With a background spanning claims, risk management, and learning and development, Tabitha has had leadership roles across the insurance industry, including serving as National Learning and Development Manager at Marsh McLennan Agency. She is also an adjunct professor at Collin College's Insurance Management program. She holds a master's degree in risk and insurance from Butler University, along with multiple industry licenses and designations. She's a passionate advocate for professional development. She's dedicated to advancing education and careers within the insurance industry. So please join me in welcoming Tabitha Richardson to our virtual webinar stage.
Wow, that sounds like that person's impressive. I don't know who that is. We may have to change that kind of an intro. Thank you so much, Julie. I appreciate that introduction, and thank you all for joining us today to talk about where licensing risks hide in property and casualty insurance. And I'm going to try to give you a little bit of information on how you can reduce them. Hopefully you learned something, and if nothing else, I'll remind you of some things that you've already learned. So we're going to get started in this section. Again, Julie gave us a really quick overview of what we're going to be talking about. And she set some expectations from the SILA Foundation perspective, but I kind of want to set some other expectations on what we're going to talk about here. The purpose of this discussion is not to have a gotcha. We're not trying to catch anybody doing anything wrong. The truth is most licensing risks don't start with the bad intention. It's really inside of the process that we all operate in. And so the goal today will be to help you find those areas where the risk may be hiding and to think about some controls and things that can help us to reduce risk. So before we dig in, because I kind of want to shape this discussion around those of you that are attending the webinar with us. So we're going to do a poll. And I just kind of want to get an idea of who do we have with us today. So we can launch that poll. And let's see, what part of the insurance industry are you a part of? I understand that we have insurance company people, we may have agency people, there may be some regulators or state professionals, or maybe you're not in the insurance industry directly. I think that we'll probably have a little something for everyone. But if I can tailor some examples or things, it helps me to kind of figure out where you all are coming from. So I'm already looking at these responses rolling in. Look at all of you that are present. We've got quite a few of you from the insurance company side. I've got some stuff for you all. Those of you from the insurance agency side, some regulators have joined us. And there's some people that are not from the industry directly. I don't know if that means that you're maybe a part of another industry. Maybe you're coming from the security side, or maybe you're just a general public individual, and we welcome you. Looks like we've got some folks from the TPA side. Welcome. Appreciate you joining us. most of this discussion, right, is again focused on that property and casualty agent or producer. I felt like I realized after the fact I left that out. I'm licensed in Texas, so we say agent a lot, and it just comes naturally to me. So, um, can we share out the results? I just think it'd be interesting for everyone else to see kind of who we've got making up our audience.
I
That
shared
way
them.
you
Me
shared
just
them. There
share.
we go. Okay.
Let me
We're
share them again. Just make sure everybody saw.
okay. Yeah, okay. I think then that we're ready to kind of dive in. I appreciate you all answering that question. We'll have a mix of some poll stuff. There'll be some places for you to chat with us, and we'll keep going. All right. So let's go. Why does any of this matter to us, right? We have licensing risk. Um, and the truth is, they rarely show up for you as a licensing problem. Um, it usually shows up as something in the operational side. And that's really where we're going to spend a lot of our time talking about how those operational things can show up as a licensing problem. We operate in an industry that is deemed to be complex by many people, whether you're in the organization, inside the industry, adjacent to it. People think insurance is complicated. Heck, I think some people just dislike insurance, and that's not good. But nonetheless, it's a complicated place. And because it's complicated, it's one of the reasons why this matters. I think that actually means it matters even more because it's a complicated industry. And so, because of the complexity, the regulatory pieces, that's why it matters, right? That's one thing. The other piece of this is going to be on the operational side, right? We're going to see that risk pop up in places that we don't expect them to. And even where we do expect them to, we still don't expect them to pop up for us, not for me. And then we'll find that even where there is a process, even within that process, you're going to see that, how we're managing the process is a place where that risk can pop up. Sometimes that can be in a role change. Sometimes that can be in a termination. Sometimes that can be in CE tracking. But overall of that, we're looking for evidence that these things have occurred. And again, none of these situations start with an issue that we think is a risk. It actually starts with that hidden scenario. So let's think about this. In your organization where you are, where does information most often get lost in your organization? Does that happen between departments? Could it be between different managers within a department? Maybe you have different locations. Maybe you're operating even in different systems. There's a lot of places where we can see that this thing will show up, and we're going to dig into that a little bit more. All right. So I've identified what I think are probably 5 areas in licensing where we're going to see um, things happen in a more common factor, right? So that's going to be in your license status, could be in the line of authority that folks are operating under, could be that carrier appointment process, could be in that termination timing, could be in role creep, maybe even in CE and CE deficiency, CE timing, and then even in our audit evidence, right? We've got that process going. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper into these 5 scenarios and talk about them a little bit more. Oh, I rolled my mouse. See, this is why you shouldn't let me control things. Okay, so we're going to start with line of authority, licensing status and line of authority. So in an organization, you're going to have different individuals that come to you. Maybe they're not licensed. I see that some of you are in a pre-licensing perspective. Those individuals are coming to you not licensed. So in the onboarding process, we're making some assumptions in onboarding. That person's not licensed. We have a little bit more information. We know that even in onboarding, assumptions are made, and I'm certain that our regulator friends that are with us don't want to hear that these things maybe are done at onboarding and then maybe they're not revisited later. But we'll pretend like that didn't that doesn't happen. So as we talk about the line of authority, like this is like foundational when it comes to property and casualty licensing. Knowing what that insurance license is, knowing what the line of authority is, these are like the most foundational pieces of all of this. If the insurance license record isn't accurate, if it's not kept up to date, everything else downstream is impacted by that. And so people are relying on that license record that typically starts at the onboarding process. Perhaps it's a situation where you've hired someone who is actually already licensed, and you make some assumptions about that person too, right? Different assumptions than what you make about that person who's coming to you and getting licensed. So we're going to shift that mindset that says, hey, we did this at onboarding and now we're done. Well, what are we doing to make sure that that flows through to other departments and that it's maintained over time? That is a completely different level of oversight. Not just saying, hey, we made that assumption, hey, this thing is going to happen, um, because this can show up in a role change. It can show up in expansion into different states. Perhaps we see this in system changes within an organization. These are areas in which it's important that you have that information and that it's kept up to date and can be relied upon throughout the entire life cycle of that individual. So um, we're going to move on into the appointment and timing process. So this is something that shows up oftentimes because there are a lot of different teams involved in the process. Um, Carrier appointments and the timing of terminations, it looks really simple on paper, right? It's an easy thing to say, hey, we hired somebody. They're working in a different department. Um, Maybe someone's stepping away from an organization. Maybe a state changed a requirement of things. This is something that you see show up. And so different carriers have different processes, they require different things. It's not even about whether you did the appointment. It's not even really about whether you did the termination. It's really about, did it happen when it was supposed to? Would you say that it was timely? I think that part of this is the right person handling the process, right? Who owns it? Who initiated it? Who is triggering that process? Who's verifying that things happen? Um, those things can be just complicated. If it's HR, if it's compliance, there's so many different people within an organization. So let's give an example. Let's say that a producer and agent is separating from a company. It's going to happen on Friday, right? Well, HR says, hey, we're going to start that separation process. I'm going to put that request in, that requisition. IT says, hey, we see that person's going to be leaving our company. So we need to remove their access. That's access to email, access to your internal systems. Hey, we don't want that producer to have access to client records. We're going to update all of that. Oh, okay. So now HR, we also need to make sure that payroll is updated because we need to take that person off of payroll. There are benefit enrollment things that need to happen. And okay, it's Friday, person turned in their equipment, they're gone, right? We're done. Everyone, termination complete. Did anybody tell the carrier that that producer left? Maybe, maybe not. If we did, do we know that we told them? Who can prove that we told them? That's really where you see the risk show up. It's not necessarily that you didn't do it. It's, I relied on someone else to do it. I think so and so does it. And so, because those tasks live in different areas, that's why the timing of it is so important. So, my question for you all is, if someone left your company today, do you know who owns each step of that process? Maybe. If I asked, 5 people in your organization, would they all say the same thing? Maybe. That's the risk, right? That's just it. It's hidden because maybe they would, maybe they would not. Um, and I think the important thing is that people who need to know that they're the ones. Sometimes they don't know that they're the ones who are supposed to know. That's where the things get really scary. Okay, so then now we have what we're going to call role creep. And I'm going to call it the unintentional exposure. This one happens over time, often. One day it just rears its ugly head and you got a problem. Um, and it is especially difficult if you're at a smaller organization. Um, it's not always obvious because people just are trying to be helpful, right? But helpfulness can cross over into a land that you do not want to be in. And because we are in that heavily regulated, complex industry we talked about, that's really where things get complicated. And often there's no supervision of any of this role creep because it's unintentional. It could be that administrative person. It could be a coverage professional, someone who's talking coverage to someone. It could look like, oh, well, I just told them what I thought that they should do. Maybe, maybe not. Um, it could be something as simple as billing, right? All of these things. I heard from some of you that quite a few of you are on the carrier side. Back in the day when I was selling insurance in the agency space, I had a customer, the insured had a claim. Um, Pretty sure it was a commercial auto claim. They called the carrier and they wanted to talk to somebody. Why they didn't call the agent, I don't know, but they called the carrier. And they were looking for the name of this person. They'd received some sort of communication. This is your adjuster. And they called the carrier. I want to speak to so and so. And someone looked up their record. Yep, you're so and so customer. And they sent them to underwriting. And it's the underwriting assistant that got the call because her name happened to be the exact same name as the claims adjuster. Well, this underwriting assistant wasn't licensed. They don't have um, the permission, the authority to speak to insured, but the insured was adamant that they needed an answer to their question, and they're asking coverage questions. And the UA didn't realize at the time that they were talking to the insured, I think, at first, and so they kind of gave an answer, and then that was it. And then they called back because they got her phone number, and then they called back, and they called back, and this person was one of the most helpful people I know. She'd give you the shirt off her back. And we had a situation of unintentional role creep because she was giving coverage information to an insured. She wasn't licensed to give it. All she wanted to do was help. And we found ourselves in a situation where she calls me and says, your insured keeps calling me. I don't know why they keep calling me. What am I supposed to do? So you have a situation where role creep happens really because people are thinking the positive thing, right? They're thinking about, I just want to be helpful. I don't want to tell the customer no. I don't want to dismiss them. I really just want to do something to help them out. And all of a sudden now we find ourselves in a situation where, ugh, that happened in a carrier situation, right? But it could happen in an agency environment. It can happen in a lot of different places. And I saw in chat where someone says, hey, the licensing team is the last to know. That's probably something the licensing team would never even know occurred. I'm lucky that as the agent in that scenario, I learned about it. And so oftentimes the thing that's going on, it happens over time. It's role creep, it's unintentional. People don't want to say anything because they don't want to be in trouble. I find that this situation also occurs when you have small organizations. In a small organization, you have people who wear multiple hats. I've worked at small agencies where there were only 5 people, and we have the receptionist handling the licensing, handling the appointments, handling all of the things. And this person doesn't know all of the pieces of information they need to know. And so you go from, hey, we've got very distinct departments to, mm, we have someone who's wearing 3 different hats. And where we have a process, maybe they're doing 3 of the 5 or more things. The lines get really blurry, and that's where we find ourselves in another situation where we have our hidden risk. So I don't know if you think about it in your organization, can you identify a place where the things where the roles are blurry, um, whether that's by design or not, where you can see that that role creep has snuck in? Okay, our favorite topic, CE, right? This is a tough one because we think licensed professionals hate to do CE, and that's the reason we have risk. Yeah, maybe, but maybe not. Um, the true underlying issue here is not about whether they like to do CE or not. I mean, I could spend all day talking to you about that. This is really more about the timing in which the CE is completed. And the goal here is not just did they do CE, whether they completed continuing education or not, because more often than not, they did. The reality here is, do we know who's supposed to complete CE? Did we check to see? Did we check too late to see if they completed their CEs? Did they complete the right ones? Are there product specific CEs that need to be done? Are there deficiencies? Because some people don't do them. What's our process around CE? This is another place where we find ourselves caught up in that hidden risk, where the timing of it is a problem. I was licensed way back in the day where the person who got the license got a piece of paper for their certificate, a literal piece of paper. They mailed it to your house and said, you completed your CE. And then I had to keep that piece of paper for a certain amount of time, depending on the state you were in. I think that I just threw those pieces of paper away in 2023. But if you had to rely on people to show you a piece of paper, could you rely on that? It's their evidence, they did it. But if you're the licensing person, do you know that they did it? Maybe. Maybe their manager got the piece of paper and not the licensee. Maybe they sent it to HR. Maybe it's in a file cabinet in their office someplace where the receptionist is managing it. I think you guys are catching the drift here, right? It is that it's disparate. It's everywhere. There is so many different ways that you could track this piece of information. Um, I think we've all run into a situation where that person has taken their CE the day before it was due because they need to renew their license. And what happens when that company that you took CE with didn't report the completion yet? You know they did it, but can you prove it? That's the key, right? I'm seeing one of you are saying here that your company has a reminder system, right? That's exactly what we're talking about. Is what are the triggers? How do we monitor the deadline? Is it a spreadsheet? Is it in an HR system? It could be any place. And it's not just, do we know who's at risk? Who's doing the follow-up? Hey, if you have that email, who's following up? Who's responsible for taking the action? What action was taken? Was it done on time? Did that action actually satisfy the CE requirement? Those are the kind of things that we say are hidden risks in licensing. So I think the takeaway from here is, are you reactive or are you proactive? I know we all want to say, I'm proactive. My company's proactive. Maybe they are in a written process, but are they in action? Mm, maybe. And that maybe is our risk. Okay, let's launch our next poll. I'm going to say, if a regulator asked you for evidence tomorrow that someone completed their CE, that someone has the right line of authority, they have the right appointments. I know this one's a little bit scary, right? Because mm, I'd like to think that we know the answer to this. Maybe we don't have any clue. Regulators, cover your eyes. Don't look at the answers. This one's scary for us, right? Minutes? Okay, hours. Days? Weeks? I have no clue. I have no clue whatsoever. I think that one probably scares me more than the others. I have no clue. Now, it could be I have no clue because I'm in a department that I'm not supposed to know. All
They're
right, let's
slowing
share
down.
out the results on
I was
this
gonna
one.
share them. They're slowing
Yeah,
down.
yeah.
They're sharing.
So look at that, right? A lot of us said minutes and hours, and that's good. I'm sure that our regulator friends are like, whew, okay. But we had some people that said more than a week. Some people said they're not sure. I think that's the place where we struggle in how do we prove it, right? Um, the question that I won't put up here, but I think that everyone encounters this particular one. There's some of those other ones that maybe people didn't encounter in their roles, but this is one of those that I think many of you who are in industry are going to encounter. And I'm not going to ask you to put it in chat. I didn't say to put it in a poll, but does your organization even have an effective audit process? Mm. We're going to go through this audit process, and in your head, you're going to say, yes, I think that they do. And then you're going to go through some of this and say, what? Audit? Who audits? Isn't that a thing that an insurance carrier does to their insureds? Uh, and if nothing else, hopefully you'll walk away and say, it may not be effective, but we have one and we're going to work on it. And I think if nothing else, being honest with yourself here, this is what's going to save you. Uh, the audit evidence is where organizations discover kind of that difference between we've done the work and can I prove the work was done. And I think one of the places here, we talked about this disparate documentation. We talked about, hey, I think it exists somewhere where I'm not sure. Um, if someone came and asked, can I tell you where it is? Who even within my organization manages it? If you have an organization that manages licensing, the organization should know who manages it. They should require evidence. Where does it live? Who owns maintaining it? How quickly can you get to it? Because it could be, hey, maybe I'm on the team that does that and I know exactly where it is. What does so and so at your company know where to get that if you are in Tahiti? Maybe, maybe not. What if you are the person who's separated from the organization? You choose to get a bigger job some other place, or you got promoted even within the same organization. Do they know where that's happening? the question here isn't about whether you execute it or not, right? I mean, we're going back to what I said in the beginning. This is not about we think that you're just doing the wrong thing just because. No, it's we believe that you're doing it, but can you prove it? And I think a lot of us will think back and say, oh, well, I know so and so sent me an email. Okay. How long is the email there for before it's purged? Well, we put it in a spreadsheet. What's the version history on that spreadsheet? How many versions of that spreadsheet do you have? And are people using the same spreadsheet or someone downloaded and then edited and now they have their own version? Okay, we put it in SharePoint. Okay, it's in SharePoint and only certain people have access to that information. Or maybe it's sitting on the individual manager's desk and they know it, but nobody else in the organization knows it, right? There's a process. Um, we wrote down a procedure. Well, where's the evidence of it? That's the risk. The risk is in the evidence and proving it. That's the place where we run into those hidden risks. These are the questions that I think if you're like me, they could scare you a little bit if you think about them a lot because, man, where is that? I thought so and so did that. Maybe they did. I don't know. I don't know. That's where our risks live. That's the problem. Okay, I've repeated myself a few times, but I'm going to say it again. This isn't about a gotcha. It's not about a make you feel bad about yourself. This is really about, hey, I know that you do this where you work. You wouldn't be able to have a company if you didn't. So we know that this stuff happens. And we know why this stuff is important. Yet these risks persist where we are. And they persist for a couple of different reasons, right? Um, Part of it is the responsibility is dispersed amongst various departments. Um, the point and control changes, right? And overall, the governance of it also changes. So you may have a lot of different hands on a process. So it becomes unclear as to who really owns it, which really makes it difficult to kind of bring to the surface any leak points that you may have. I actually had a discussion this morning. We had a process, and I think there were six people, six departments that touch one process. And someone made a suggestion about a change, one change, which on the surface looks like a really simple change, right? Oh, well, we can just.
Mm-mm.
How many times do you hear the word just at your company? We can just do this. That one change impacts everybody in all those departments. And that one thing, as we started unpacking it, was saying, hey, we need to bring all these people to the table for a discussion because we tried to fix this one thing and then it caused problems here, here, and here. And we didn't know because we don't do that part of the equation. And right? Again, we talked about that oftentimes the control starts at the onboarding process. And maybe it doesn't trickle into other areas. Maybe we're not seeing that flow of the process, but it's documented here. We know that's a trigger, but something might be broken. So I'll ask agencies that I work with, people that I talk to, who owns licensing oversight? And people think right away, oh, that's compliance. Okay. Who owns hiring? Um, well, it depends on what part of hiring, because recruiting, oh, that's HR. But the hiring, that's the hiring manager, and that's the local office, that's the local branch. Okay, what happens when roles change? Who owns that process? Um, well, HR, because we have to change the employee record. Okay, who's reporting that to everybody? And who documented it? And now, what you think was a simple process has all of these multiple teams involved in a process because each of them touch a different piece of the process. So I'm going to ask you all in your organization, just from what you know, I'm not going to hold you to it. In our chat, drop in a number of what you think. How many departments touch licensing oversight in your organization? Doesn't have to be an exact number. Give me a range. One, six-ish, three, two, 12. It's a lot of people. When it's one person, two people, okay, well, maybe you can answer that. Three, five more, that gets to be more complicated, right? Because you're struggling with who actually is the person? Who's the one that I'm looking into? This is the risk, right? Again, we spent all that time talking about the various pieces of risks that live when it comes to licensing. This is one of those um, about even if you can identify it, even if you can find it, why it's difficult to plug the hole and keep them from reoccurring. Because the process, the reality of the operations in which we do, they just really are all over the place. Okay, we had some regulators in the crowd today. I'm sure that they're paying attention here. I bet you that they would have wished that I spent the whole presentation just talking about this piece. Uh, I'm going to invite any of our regulators who want to add to anything on this slide to add some things to the chat here. Um, we're going to talk about kind of how things are seen from the regulator perspective, and when they think about all of the people involved in our licensing equation. Regulators really are focused on not just is there oversight, not just is there a process, what happens with the process, right? I'm going to say at a high level, not being a regulator, so I'm going to speak for people that I'm not, but regulatory expectations I've put into 5 buckets that I've got here on the slides for you. And that's ongoing oversight, clear accountability, repeatable controls, timely remediation, and then documented evidence. So let's break them down. Ongoing. I think it's kind of clear, right? Just as it says, it needs to be continuous. Um, Not just that there is an oversight, but is it ongoing? Does it keep happening? That's what's important to a regulator. Not that you say that you have it, process, but is that process continual? Accountability. Okay, this is a place where we're saying no excuses allowed. Who owns it? Maybe the person who owns it isn't the person that's accountable for it, but if they're accountable, do they know who's doing the things? And ultimately, is that process a repeatable process? Is the process you wrote out, that procedure that lives in your organization, is it something that I could pick up and hand to a new person who walked in the door tomorrow and ask them to do it? Oh, yeah, of course it is. Well, is it that way to you because you've worked there? Is it plain English to that person that they could just do it? Um, is that field manager, that supervisor, or do they know what to do? Do they do it with every employee that's under their purview? Is it happening with every person that comes in the door consistently? That's the question about repeatable. The next one here is not just remediation, right? Because we know you have to do the remediation when you find the issues. The question is, was your remediation timely? Could you identify the issue? And how quickly did you resolve it? And did you document it properly? I mean, all roads lead to documentation. I know one of the first things when I joined the insurance industry, it was document, document, document. Documentation saves your bacon all the time. And it's probably the place where most of us get hung up. It's the place where most of us find ourselves failing, falling off the wagon. Yes, we have ongoing oversight. Yes, we know exactly who the person is. And yes, it's repeatable. Yep, we have something that says we're supposed to do this. And I know this because I've been working here for 30 years and I know exactly what's supposed to happen. But did we document it? And yes, I know what's supposed to happen. And yes, I did it. But did I document it? Because documentation isn't just that I document what the process was, it's did I document what I did? And this is where we get caught up. This is the place I think where all of us, and regulators, you can correct me where I'm wrong and say, yeah, when we start talking to organizations, is it some other place other than documentation? They can tell us, they can speak to it, but they can't prove it. That's the place. This is the one. Okay. So we've identified what the risk was. We talked about why they keep showing up. We've talked about what regulators are looking for from you. So let's talk about what we can do, right? There are really, I've reduced it to four, I'm going to call them practical steps. And it's stuff we've been talking about. It's stuff I've said a couple of times already, right? It is assigning ownership. It is making sure the roles are aligned. It's are there triggers that we can monitor? And did we document for the audit? That's the internal audit, and that's even the external audit with that regulator. So we know what teams are doing it. We know what teams are doing the work. Do we say this person owns this thing? So if the process change needs to happen, they own it. It's theirs. Do we know that the people who are in the various positions, that's what that role mapping that we're talking about. Do you understand the positions that are inside of your organization and what they need to have in that circle? Because I think that's what triggers things based on understanding how all of that works. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's say that you have a producer who's transitioning from personal lines work into commercial lines work. So role change. If you're at an agency, right, an agency organization, you think, oh, what kind of license do they have? Because within property and casualty, right, you have all these different types of licenses that someone could hold. Maybe they're limited lines, maybe they're personal lines, um, maybe it's work comp only, and now they're moving into some other place. So, okay, I'm going to look at the license review. But tell me, what else do you need to look at? This person's transitioning from personal to commercial. What are some other things within your process that you would look at? Drop some of them in the chat for me. Either what you look at or what you think should be looked at. Confirming the roles and responsibilities is a really important one. Anything else? Ooh, state address change. Those catches, doesn't it? State laws, right? CE credits. What about those appointments we talked about? There you go, line of authority. The appointments. Did we do an appointment review? I like that comment. The right people need to be at the table, right? It's do all those people who are involved in that role change show up and understand what the compliance needs? That's a really big one. Um, what about systems permissions? Hey, maybe you have with that carrier appointment, now you need access to different systems within your organization. Um, maybe that person needs to be trained on the new products that they're selling. Maybe we talked about this before, roles and responsibilities. Maybe we need to document. Hey, is the team that's managing commercial lines also managing commercial lines and personal lines? Are they the same team? Because maybe the oversight started over here in this place and it's moving over here. Although not completely the scope of this, but what if they're coming from life and health employee benefits side and now they're moving into property and casualty? It's a completely different thing, right? They have a license. Do they have the right license? Do they have the right access? Do they have the right training, the right product training? All of these things can trigger that control, right? Those are all the kind of things. So if you whether you've had a recent role change or you see people in your organization, um, and when you think about in this arena, what are some things that you would want to strengthen to reduce your risk within your organization? Just think about that a little bit more. Okay, metrics, right? I know how much we all love metrics. You love to hate them, don't you? Metrics can be painful, but they can be helpful at the same time. They'll basically display for you whether the thing that you're doing is improving. So the goal is not really just to create this complicated dashboard on day one. No one's asking you to be a coding expert, but we are saying think about what are some meaningful indicators within your organization that can display whether that risk is decreasing. We've talked about this line of authority and license accuracy. What are some things that you can do within your organization that will show that this risk has reduced itself, right? It could be, hey, this person is responsible for maintaining that record, and that's a metric. So before, when we did an audit of this record, we had this many people who had the wrong line of authority. And now we have this many people who had the wrong line of authority. That's a metric that shows whatever you're doing is working. Um, Timeliness is timeline, right? So here you go, an appointment and termination. What's that process? Syncing up with your HR team, saying, hey, when we do a termination, we need to know same day. We need to know X, Y, and Z because we must turn off appointments within 48 hours, within whatever it is, right? Having that information in timeline. Okay, let's look at the last one that we did. This person separated from the organization and we had everything turned off within 24 hours. That's a metric that'll show your efficiency, your speed. CE is one of those that's easier to see, right? To say, hey, how many people do we have that's deficiency? You can do a rate of deficiency. You can do an audit to evidence completeness. How timely are people creating that? And ultimately, at the end of the day, is preparing yourself for an audit. Um, One of the big benefits to these metrics is it communicates to leadership that you can be trusted. I don't know, all of us want to be trusted in our role from our leaders. We want them to not feel like they must micromanage us, that we've been given a task and we'll see it through to completeness and accuracy. And so these metrics are a way for you to communicate to your leadership that, hey, we did this timely. Look at how this thing has reduced with us implementing this process. It allows leadership to breathe and maybe allows you to have a little bit less of that neck gripping oversight, right? It allows you to breathe a little bit more easily. And so that's one of these things that will help you within your organization. So these are just a few ideas. There are going to be more that you can think of, things that are specific to your organization. And so we're going to launch our next poll. So we've talked about a couple of different areas. And after we've gone through this, my question to you is, when you go back to your desk tomorrow, maybe later on today, what are the things that you think you want to review? What are some things that you think within your organization is worth looking back into? Uh, I I ask this question just as a self-reflection because it's important for all of us to consider what are the things that may be driving these risks at our organization? What are the areas that we can say, hey, maybe I think that's not such a big deal, but it's more. Maybe this one requires a little bit more digging, or right off the top, I know that's one that we absolutely need to look into a little bit more. And I think that will be beneficial for our organization. I'm seeing a couple of um, answers here, and I think that it's interesting to see how this is how this is split. Do we share this out to everybody? Because I just think that it's interesting to show.
They're still coming in. All right, guys, I'm cutting it off. So hit enter.
Okay.
Now I'm sharing.
Yeah. I think it's kind of split, right? Audit evidence does seem to be leading the pack, but then the other places, um, it seems like you all have some really good controls in CE, and so people aren't thinking that's an area. But between ownership and appointment tracking and role alignment, these are places where we are identifying areas that we really can all just do a self-reflection. And that's really what we want to wrap up here, and say, hey, the key here is, can we identify the risk, right? If I leave you with anything, if you don't remember anything else about this here, is every organization has a process. Every organization has good people trying to do the right things. The difference really is in organizations that struggle and organizations that succeed. The question is not about commitment to the process. It's really about visibility. So if you take one thing away from this, I want it to be proactive. I see Lori put in there like the oops is going to happen, right? The oops is going to happen. It's not about whether it will happen. It's about what are you going to do to fix them. And I want you to think back on some of the examples we've discussed. None of these things that we talked about were someone had bad intent, someone intentionally did a thing. They are the oops. It's just a question of how do we do better about fixing them? What can we do to tighten things up and to make things operate more smoothly? So I'm going to pause and say, are there any questions that you all have before we turn this thing back over to Julie?
All right. Well, I say when there are no questions at the end that you've done an excellent job of covering all of your bases. So, Tabitha, thank you so much for sharing your expertise on this topic and for being a friend of the SILA Foundation. We appreciate you and your time so much this afternoon. As a reminder, our webinars are free of charge. They are open to the public. We love it when you share our invitations. Watch for and complete the post-webinar survey, and please plan on joining us next month for a panel discussion on roles in insurance and securities industries.